I want to focus a little more on actually preparing a lesson to be taught using accordance. Here's what I mean by that. Obviously, you can use accordance to do all your research, and then you know, you can print out an outline and teach from it. You can drag pictures and text and so on into a keynote presentation and teach from that. I wonder sometimes how many of our users actually dare to teach directly from accordance. I do it all the time, and I find it incredibly helpful. And so I'm going to kind of be showing you some of the ways that I prepare lessons to teach. And then when I teach, I basically just project accordance on the screen and teach from accordance. So it'll be a little bit of research, but also a little bit of actually using accordance to teach the lesson. And hopefully, by going through some of the where I've been living in some of my own teaching recently, you'll see some things that'll be helpful to you.
David, I will record today. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Not sure I want you to do that, because we may be hopping all over the place. But okay, fine. All right. So here is basically the setup of accordance that that I used to teach Sunday school this Sunday. And Sunday school this Sunday was particularly challenging because I've been teaching through the book of Joshua, and up until about chapter 15, there are all kinds of battles and locations and excitement and miracles. You get to around chapter 15, and the narrative shifts into the allotment of the 12 tribes of Israel. And so basically you get stuff like this. You know, their southern border, the southern border for the tribe of Judah began at the tip of the Dead Sea, went to Akrabim, proceeded to Zin. Not the most exciting narrative to try to discuss. And so, you know, I didn't just want to skip it because it is important, but I also know my audience and knew that it would, you know, 5 minutes into reading all these names, their eyes are going to glaze over. So what I tried to do to cover this material in a way that they could understand, that wouldn't feel too tedious for them, was I actually just projected a workspace like this with my English text, and this is generally how I teach, and it's a good way to teach when you're teaching exegetically through a particular book or passage. I just slap the text up there and we read through it together, and I go back and forth and comment on any passages that are of particular interest. And it's great from a Sunday school vantage point, because people can say to me, hey, wait, go back up there, I just saw something I want to ask a question about, and so we can generate a little bit of discussion. So I'll usually have the text up, and in this case I also had the atlas displayed, and I overlaid under the regions, I chose the tribes of Israel. And so I just popped the map up there. Now these tribal boundaries are the ideal boundaries that are given here in the book of Joshua. So not necessarily all territory that the Israelites immediately conquered, but the territory that they were promised and allotted. And so my initial foray through all of this was just to kind of go through, you know, their southern border began at the tip of the Dead Sea. So I went, okay, here's the tip of the Dead Sea. Went south of the ascent of Akrabim, so jogged south. Then ascended to the south of Kadesh Barnea. One of the things that I did, instead of major biblical sites, I chose all biblical sites, because you'll get more detail. And it showed more of these obscure border sites so they could actually see the names on the map. And so I essentially just kind of went around the border and covered this fairly quickly, but at least gave them a sense of where these places are, that these are real places, and that this description does actually make sense. I think that was important to bring the text out of just, okay, this is a bunch of names I don't recognize, something that they could understand. All right, so that's kind of how I began. And so for me, my preparation for the lesson was basically getting the map ready to go, and displaying it. And then I worked through the text. And because I was trying to prepare as many as 3 chapters, we got through 3 chapters on Sunday, because we covered a lot of these borders very quickly. But I could have done a lot more research on this passage and brought out more things. So let's go down a little bit. Once we get past the borders, you end up with, this was the boundary of the descendants of Judah around their clans. And then in verse 13, it starts talking about Caleb. Now, we had already covered in a previous week that Caleb had asked to conquer the hill country around Hebron because the ferocious, gigantic Anakites were there, and Caleb had the attitude, well, I think I can take it. The Lord's on my side, so give me the tough land that nobody else wants to take. And so we'd covered that in a previous week. This story talks about, again, picks up the story of Caleb's conquests of Hebron. And then it summarizes what we talked about before. Caleb drove out from there the 3 sons of Anak. From there, he marched against the inhabitants of Debir, whose name used to be Kiriath Sefer. Now, in this case, I don't see Debir on the map. So I'm going to select the place named Debir, and I'm just going to amplify to the atlas. So I'll choose the map color scheme that I've used, and now I've found that location. So even though I didn't prepare all of this level of detail ahead of time, I can quickly use accordance to locate things and bring those out. So that's another reason that I like to teach from accordance, because I've got the flexibility. If I end up deciding to focus on something that I didn't necessarily prepare ahead of time, I can still do a quick search or two, or get information about that particular site. So another thing I might do, here it's talking about Debir, whose name used to be Kiriath Sefer, so that's the original name of the site. And Caleb said, I'll give my daughter Achsah as a wife to the one who strikes down and captures Kiriath Sefer. And so Othniel, Caleb's nephew, captures Debir and is given this young lady as a wife. And then she goes to her father. When she arrived, she persuaded Othniel to ask her father for a field. As she got off her donkey, Caleb asked her, what do you want? She replied, give me a blessing, since you have given me land in the Negev. Give me the springs of water also. So he gave her the upper and lower springs. And so here, I focused a little more on this because this is a bit of narrative that's a little more interesting than just the border descriptions. And so I said, well, let's talk a little bit about the Negev. So I'm going to select Negev, and I will amplify to the atlas again so we can see where the Negev is, and it's this region down here in the south of Judah. And then if I double click Negev and the atlas, accordance will open up whatever my default resource is to look up information from the atlas. And in this case, it's the photo guide overview. If you have the graphics bundle, you'll probably have the photo guide overview. And I've got that set up to be my default. If you don't, you can go into the preferences and go to map tab display, and down here at the bottom you can choose the resource that you want to appear when you double click on a place name on the map. I could choose Anchor Bible Dictionary or any of my other dictionaries, but the photo guide is designed to work with the atlas. And so I can read a little bit about the Negev. And in cases like this, you know, again, this is now getting to the level where you can do this kind of stuff on the fly, and sometimes I will, but you don't want to do too much of this on the fly because it kind of bogs down the lesson. So now we're sort of looking at the kinds of research that you would do ahead of time to prepare a lesson to then deliver. So let's look at the photo guide here. Now, one of the problems in opening the photo guide is it's very small and I've only got a few lines of text. So one feature that you may or may not be aware of is that for each of these zones in the workspace, and each of these areas of the workspace is called a zone. So I've got a zone for my English Bible, I've got a zone for the Atlas, I've got a zone for tools like the photo guide. And each of those zones can have multiple tabs in them. So if I were to open up the timeline, it might appear in this zone. If I were to open up another dictionary, it might appear in this zone, and so on. But any of these zones can be expanded or magnified by clicking this little icon in the zone title bar. It's on the right in the Mac, on Windows it's on the left. But just click this little icon, it says magnify this zone, and now I can focus on the research that I'm doing. Even though I've partially got my workspace set up, but I'm still doing research, I can focus on this for the time being. And here you'll see different pictures in the Negev. I can also go to the photo guide Israel, which will give me even more photos. The photo guide has gotten so large, we've now had to divide it among a number of different modules. And so the overview will point you to the appropriate module. So if I were in a site in Turkey, it would say, here's a link to Photo Guide Turkey. And if I'm in Israel, here's a link to Photo Guide Israel. But this picture here is a picture of a stream in the Negev. And it's great for illustrating the Negev because the Negev is a very sort of semi-arid, it's not quite desert land, but it's very desert-like. It's sort of pre-desert. And you have a lot of dust in this area. Basically, dust blows in from the Mediterranean, and the winds coming off the Mediterranean are blowing dust in from the Sahara Desert in Africa. And so this land is covered with this kind of chalky powder. And it's not terribly arable. It's not good farmland, but it is good grazing land, pasture land. In areas like this, where you have a wadi, a riverbed that in the rainy season fills with water, and you can see in this picture how green the land around this river is. And of course, this talks about, you know, in Psalm 42, when it talks about as a deer longs for streams of water, so I long for you, God. This picture is reminiscent of that. And then Psalm 126:4, restore our fortunes, Lord, like water courses in the Negev or streams in the desert. There's a popular devotional called Streams in the Desert, and that's what that's referring to. So I've got this picture here that I may want to share with my class, and you know, I don't want to go through to show this picture. I don't want to go through the process of opening up the photo guide in the middle of class, finding the picture, clicking on the picture, and displaying it like that. I want it to be ready to go when I teach. So when I click the thumbnail to bring up the picture window, you have a number of icons here down at the bottom. I can zoom in or out. I can also go full screen. But the one I want to point out to you is this little arrow, and it's move picture to a new zone. And so I can click that arrow, and I'll actually get a picture zone that will collect my pictures here that I want to show. So, you know, I could go back here and I could say, well, let's also do this picture because it shows how dry this land is. Well, I can, you know, keep clicking these pictures, expanding them, and then clicking that arrow. Or I can use a little shortcut of holding down the Command key, or it would be the Control key on Windows, and just clicking the thumbnail. And notice that it automatically, instead of opening the big picture window that obscures everything, it automatically opened that window, that picture in a separate tab. And so now I've got my Streams in the Desert picture, and I've got my dry, arid picture of the Negev here. All right. So we've talked about the Negev, and I've collected these pictures here. So I went ahead and closed the photo guide. But let's double click on Dabir and see if we get anything. Now in the photo guide, unfortunately, we don't have an article about this particular site. Notice it skipped right past the entry field because it didn't find Dabir in the photo guide entry field, which is the titles of articles on Dabir. So it switched to the English content, and it found, well, let's magnify this zone again so you can see this. It found another site, Lo Dabar, which is similar to a name which means to Dabir, and they start talking about, you know, this location, but this is not the location. And if I click the hit icon, I find another site, Tel Beit Mersim, which Albright, a famous archaeologist of the 19th century, identified as Dabir, but modern excavators now think he's wrong. So I don't have in the photo guide an article on Dabir. So if I wanted to show a photo of Dabir, that particular site, I can't do it using the photo guide. So how do I find a picture of Dabir to illustrate here? Well, let's close the photo guide overview here, and I'm going to go to my toolbar and click in the research field up here. And the research field lets me search my entire accordance library for anything I want to find. So if I were doing a topical study on mercy or something like that, I could search the English, any English language of any tool or text, type mercy, and well, let's just do that just so you can see what it'll do. So I'm searching English. I'll search all of my tools, and I have, if not everything, just about everything that is available in accordance. So I have a huge library of materials, and you saw how quickly accordance just searched my entire library for mercy, and here are the results. So I've got dictionaries, and I can keep exploring more dictionaries, commentaries, grammars, Greek lexicons, Hebrew lexicons, on and on and on. I could spend all day going through all of this material. or I can just start scrolling and it'll go from resource to resource, and then when I decide, oh well, hey, that looks interesting, I can click open and it'll open up that particular dictionary so that I can read that particular article. So that's how the research window and field up in the toolbar work in a nutshell. Well, that's searching for an English word. I could also search for a Greek or a Hebrew word. But what I want to do is I can click on this magnifying glass to change the search parameters. And I'm going to choose image. Instead of English, Greek, Hebrew, or Syriac, or verses, I'm going to choose image. And then I'm going to choose, well, we can do, I could do all tools, but I'm just going to do graphics tools. That's a subset of tools that tend to focus on having a lot of pictures and things. So we'll just narrow our search to that. And I'll do a search for De Beer. And when I hit return, I get the research window here. And the first thing that comes up is a nice picture of De Beer from Zondervan's Illustrated Bible Background Commentary on the Old Testament. And so I can say, great, that's a picture that I want to use. So I'm just going to command click that picture, and notice it got added to my zone with these other pictures that I selected. So I can go right from the research tab to collecting pictures. Let's go back to the research tab here. Now, one of the things that obviously anytime you do a search, you need to be careful of false hits. If I look at the biblical world in pictures, this is talking about the De Beer, or Holy of Holies. So De Beer, in addition to being a place name, is also a Hebrew word that means the Holy of Holies, presumably. So anytime I see De Beer not capitalized, I go, oh wait, that's talking about a temple and a location in a temple. So that's not relevant to me. So I'm just skipping all of that, lowercase, lowercase, and going on down. Now I find a donkey near De Beer, goat near De Beer, winnowing at De Beer. This one's kind of interesting. You have this gentleman winnowing grain in the chalky dust of the Negev, which presumably is a difficult thing to do. So I might want that picture, and so I can add that to my workspace. Another thing to notice, when you magnify a zone, when you take this little window here for the research tab and you magnify it so that it fills the whole window. If I do something that switches me to another window, Accordance will stay magnified and just switch to a different zone. So if I wanted to see this article and I clicked open, it's going to open this particular resource, which is called Cultural Images of the Holy Land, to that location. And it's going to switch to my tools zone and show me that at full size. And I can always minimize that zone again by clicking that same little icon to make it a small size again. Here it is down here. So I just want you to be aware when you're magnified and you switch between switch to a different resource that would display in a different zone, it's staying magnified and it's just switching for you. And so you may be able to work that way for a while and then go, wait a minute, I need to go back to minimizing my zone so I can see everything I'm doing. But anyway, these are some examples of how I would do a little research to collect some pictures to show to my Sunday school class. And once I'm done with the research tab, I can just close it. I can also close the the tools zone here. And now I've got in my workspace, I've got all of these pictures that are helpful to show. But they're in a tiny little zone down here. And they're also making my atlas zone, which I wanted to be able to display side by side with my text, smaller than I want it to be. So what I would typically do is I would click in the title bar of this zone after I've collected all these pictures, and I just drag it over into my Bible text zone and drag it right into the area where the tabs appear. And you'll see a little preview that says pictures, a little square there. And that's showing that all of these tabs will go right here. And when I release the mouse button, now I've got my workspace, and I need to zoom these larger. But now I can show all of these pictures when I want to and not before. They're all neatly tucked into tabs behind my text. And then when I want to reference them, I can click to those pictures. Any questions to this point? I've been jumping around and doing a lot of different things. So if you have any questions, let me know before I move on.
Not right now.
Everybody with me?
Mm-hmm.
All
I
right.
don't see any questions right now, David.
Okay. One of the things that now sort of switching back to how do I teach this material within accordance when I'm actually presenting it? I've got these pictures here, but they all sort of begin Negev, and then that's all I see of that. You know, these titles that we have of, well, let's magnify this zone so we can see them a little better. Here I have Negev, a stream in the Negev, Ein Avdat Canyon. This is from Zibcot. This is a picture of Debir. And then this just says cultural images. Well, I may not remember from these labels, especially when the zone is minimized and I can barely read the labels, which pictures I'm going to get when I click one of these tabs. So what I will do typically is I'll click this little menu item here and choose Rename Tab. And then I'll just say Streams in Negev. And I'll rename the tab something that I can see. Even at a narrow width, I've got enough that I can go, okay, that's my streams picture. And this one I might do dry Negev or something like that. So that I've got just enough so that I know what I'm going to get.
Game, played in many beautiful places, but it's never been experienced like this before.
Apparently, I may have a web browser in the background or something that's suddenly playing an ad, so I'm sorry about that. But by renaming this tab, I can see, okay, you know, so this is going to give me a deserty picture. This one I might rename to Debir. And then this one I can call winnowing. All right, so you can customize your workspace, even the names of the tabs, so that you don't, you know, you're not flipping between the wrong pictures before you get to the right one. I can go right to my streams in the desert picture and talk about that. All right. Another thing that while we're talking about presentation is you can go into something in accordance called slideshow mode. One of the advantages of showing accordance and teaching a lesson from it is that I can do some of this stuff on the fly if I haven't prepared it ahead of time. But when I'm prepared and I'm all ready to teach and I want them to focus on the content, there's lots to distract them. There's the toolbar up here. There's all of the interface elements within each of these windows. There's the instant details box down here at the bottom. That's taking up screen real estate, and when I project this to a projector, of course, everything's scrunched down even more. I'm not able to display quite as much as I can on my laptop. And so there may be times when you just want to be able to focus on the content and not the program interface. And so I can go into slideshow mode, but what it's going to give me an error message here. And it's going to tell me that slideshow requires only one zone per workspace. This is something I've been after them to change for years, but for whatever reason, that's a current limitation. So because I have the atlas in a separate zone, I can't go into slideshow mode. But I can easily grab the tab here for the map and drag it into my other zone and add it as a tab. And so now I have a single zone with my Bible, with my map. Let's drag the map over here. I will generally reorder tabs if I do I do a single zone kind of approach. I'll reorder the tabs so that they're in the order that I want them to appear. Let's do dry negative first and then streams in the negative. So once I've got my tabs arranged the way I want, I can go choose slideshow from the window menu. And notice that it expands the window that I'm in to the full extent of my screen. And you can't really see it because the picture is not enlarged. Let's go back to the beginning. And here, this is my text here. And so you can see the entire top portion of the search window where I can do my searches is hidden. And the instant details box down at the bottom is hidden. And yet I've got my text here and I can focus their attention on the text if I want to. Even still, this is not a crippled kind of presentation. I've still got some flexibility here. If I want to add a parallel, let's say I want to compare another translation like the ESV, I can put that in parallel right here. I can even highlight the differences. You still have the flexibility of accordance. I'm just focusing their attention on the display portion of the window. And I still have a few knobs that I can tweak to change the display on the fly. When I move my mouse, this little control palette comes up. I can move it. Oh, what's that? I can move it where I want it to go, except I guess I can't move it to the bottom of the screen. But I can click the right arrow to go to the next slide. And so here's my map. I can scroll on the map. I can even change the display of the map to meet whatever needs I want. If I wanted to show modern nations, I can switch to modern nations real quick. So you've still got a great deal of capability, but in a nicer presentation mode. And then I can click to go to the next slide and the next, and so on. And in here, I'm not seeing the zoom buttons, which may be a little bug. In slideshow mode, we should still see the zoom in and out buttons here, but even without them, I've got the keyboard shortcut Command plus or minus to zoom in and out. So I can go from slide to slide and zoom in real quick. And of course, I'd want to do this before I get to my Sunday school class and display this. But that's slideshow mode, and that's what slideshow mode enables you to do. All right. And to get out of slideshow mode, you can just hit escape. I think you can also do the keyboard shortcut Option, Command, or Control S. So you've got a number of options for how to display accordance when you're actually teaching from it. Well, let me show you one other thing. In slideshow mode, if I go into slideshow, where is it now? There. I've lost the instant details. And sometimes the instant details are helpful to have. So the instant details, that's the section at the bottom of the window that when I hover over a word, it'll give me information about that word. If I hovered over this little note thing, it would show me, well, let's show you what it'll show you. So if I hover over that, it'll give me little definitions in the HCSB. You've got a glossary that will give me definitions of what the negev is. If I hover over a footnote, it'll give me the footnotes. If I hover over a word, it'll give me the word in Hebrew. So there's lots of information that you can get using the instant details box. And you lose that in slideshow mode. However, in slideshow mode, you can click and hold on an item to get the instant details in a popover window. So if I want to see the Hebrew of the word negev, I can click and hold, and it'll pull that up there. If I want to see a footnote, I can click and hold. So you've still got another way to access your instant details in that situation. And if I go to the map, if I want to show the coordinates for a region or something like that, if I go to De Beer and I click and hold here, it'll give me the elevation and the coordinates of that location. If I select a place name, let's do Beersheba, and click and hold, it'll give me a preview of the article on Beersheba. So if I need a quick bit of information to help me as I'm teaching, even without leaving slideshow mode, I can get a little bit of help.
David,
All right.
in slideshow mode.
Okay, any other questions at this point?
Yes, David, in slideshow mode, can I see?
All right, well then I'll press on.
David?
One of the things that I've been doing here is because I'm preparing a lesson to be displayed directly within accordance, I tend to just go right from my research to presentation. I'll just as I've been doing, you know, I see a picture, I say, okay, I want that, and I put it in a tab, and now it's there and ready for me to use. And I may collect a bunch of pictures and then decide, you know what, I'm not going to use that one, I'm not going to use that one, and I'll say, you know what, I won't use the winnowing picture, so we'll get rid of that. So that's going directly from research to preparing my presentation. But you may not want to work that way. You may, especially in a situation like this, where, you know, I'm teaching from a passage of Joshua that is fairly self-explanatory, and I just need to kind of illustrate a few things to help my Sunday school class understand it. But if you're dealing with a passage that has a lot of theological content, or, you know, is a more difficult passage to explain, or whatever, you may this system that I'm doing may not be ideal for that. So I want to kind of back up and look at doing some of these things in a in an intermediate kind of way. So let me, I think I'm going to go ahead and close everything but my text. By the way, here's another little shortcut you can use. Right now I've got these 5 tabs, and I want to close 4 of them. I just want to keep this tab. Well, I could go through and I could click the close icon of each of these tabs, or I can use a little shortcut and hold the Option key down on Mac or the Alt key on Windows, and I can click the close icon of the tab I want to keep. It's a little counterintuitive because you're clicking this close icon and closing all the others. But it's a nice little shortcut to be able to, okay, I don't need all the rest of that stuff. I just want this. Option, click that close icon, and it'll get rid of all the other tabs. And that, we didn't come up with that. We actually stole that from Safari. So if you're in Safari on the Mac and you have a bunch of tabs and you want to get rid of all but one, just Option, click the close icon of the one you want to keep. All right, so let's go back through this text and kind of go back through the process that we did there. And what I want to show you is how to use the stack and the paper features. I won't really have much time to go into the papers, but I'll just kind of give you an idea of how that works. So the stack is a new feature of Accordance 12, and it's designed to help you prepare your lessons or collect your research and kind of organize it and sort it, and then do whatever it is you're going to do with it. To show you the stack, let's just start. I'm going to just open, I'm going to click and hold on the icon here and just open the current stack. My current stack is called 2 Samuel 11 Sermon, and it's devoted to information for a sermon that I preached on 2 Samuel 11, the story of David and Bathsheba. And you can see what the stack looks like here. You've got different items. So these are a couple of picture items. And then this is a user item. And I need to give this a title, but anyway, I've got a little note to myself where I've created an item for my stack as a way to say, okay, be sure to look this up and and look at what's found here. This new user item says, be sure to reference 2 Samuel 7, 1 through 20, God's promise to build David a house. So in the process of doing my research, I wrote little notes to myself. This is a link to the Bible Times Photo Museum. And let me go ahead and show you where this came from. I think it'll make a little more sense if I show you. Well, let's do it this way. I'll explain a little more about the stack and how it works here, but let's just add something to our stack. So I'm going to select select this portion of text here. And then I'm just going to click Add to Stack in my workspace toolbar. And it's going to add a new item to my stack, Joshua 15, 16 through 19. And there's the text, so I can see the text right in my stack. And then I've got, it automatically records the source where I got this from. So if I close the text window here, And I later start going back through my my stack, and I go, well, wait, I want to see this in context. I can just click the source button, source icon, and it opens up that particular resource to that particular text for me. So now, going back up here, this bit about midlife crisis, David's adultery with Bathsheba. David was likely around 50 years old. Well, if I click the source icon, it shows me that this bit of text here, David was likely around 50 years old, comes from the Bible Times Photo Museum. And it's an article that talks about David's adultery with Bathsheba. David was likely around 50 years old when he sent Joab and the Israelite army to besiege the Ammonite capital of Rabbah. And so, you know, that that insight when I was preaching made me go, well, wait a minute, if he's 50 years old, then maybe he's going through a midlife crisis. And so that's an element that I decided I want to bring that out in my sermon. So what I did, I'm going to just close this, and we'll just add this to the stack, and I'll show you what I did there. So I'm going to select David was likely around 50 years old, and then I'll just click Add to Stack. And it gives me the title of this article. Well, it's actually the title, it's giving me Israelite Jewish rulers, and the reason for that is if I open up the table of contents, it's under Israelite Jewish rulers, under David, and then David's adultery with Bathsheba. So it's giving me the top article title as my item title here. So I might change this and go, you know, go David and Bathsheba, or something like that. And then I have a note field where I can add little annotations to my stack. So I can go midlife crisis, question mark, and that's all I need to tell myself. I need to spell life correctly, but that's all I need to tell myself. Hey, be sure to look into this and talk about it some. And again, I've got my it keeps the source here, so even if I close this, I can always get back to that article. All right, so the stack becomes a really useful tool. Again, I can add a user item. So let's add a user item here. I'm actually kind of starting to mix Joshua with 1 Samuel. So let's start with a clean slate here. I'm going to delete this and get that bit about Joshua out of my stack. And I'm going to create a new stack for this particular lesson on Joshua. So if I just click the Add to Stack button, it will add whatever text I select to my current stack, whatever that is. But I can always Option or Alt click on the Add to Stack icon, and I can create a new stack. And so this stack will be Joshua 15 lesson. And I'll click OK. So now when I select this, let's see what it'll do. If I click Add to Stack, I'm not sure if it'll go to the new stack or if it'll go to, yes, it went to the new stack that I created. So Add to Stack will go to whatever the last stack you created or the last stack you used. That will be your current stack.
David, there are.
So now I have a stack dedicated to Joshua 15.
David?
And I might then go through the same process that I went through in my research and say, okay, well, let's look up let's select Negev, and let's look that up in the atlas. And I can select an area of the map, and I believe I can click Add to Stack. And notice that it gives me a 2D map selection. It gives me just that little bit that I selected, and I can say Negev here. And I can even say, you know, show map in slideshow, or whatever I want to do to gather this element of my research. All right, so I believe I can also, and that's interesting, if I click on that, it just takes the picture, but that's interesting. It doesn't let me go back to the atlas at that location, because what it's actually added here is a picture of the map. Let's see what happens if I just do add to stack like this without a selection. No, it's still doing the same thing. It's taking a picture of the map and adding that to my stack. So anyway, I've got to go back and open the map the usual way. But I'm going to double click on Negev here, find that picture of the streams in the Negev, and I'll just do the picture here, and I believe I can choose add selection to stack. And so if I go to current stack, it's now added that particular picture to my stack, and then I've got the source link here so that I can always go back to it. And then I might say, okay, well, let's add this picture too. So I'm going to go to the selection menu and do add selection to stack, current stack. I believe I could also, let's see, if I control click, no, I can't add to the stack there. So you have to go through the selection menu when you're dealing with this picture preview window. All right, so you get the idea. Here I'm gathering research for my lesson like this, and then I can do whatever I want to with that research. In this case, what I'm going to do, let's say that I'm not teaching a lesson where I'm going to be projecting all this stuff in accordance. I'm going to be turning in a student paper for a seminary class or something like that. So I'm going to go to papers, and I'm going to do new paper. And by the way, the papers icon I don't believe is included in the standard toolbar set. Add to stack is now. But papers, I believe I added to the toolbar. And to add anything to the toolbar, just control or right click the toolbar, go to customize toolbar, and then I can find papers on in here somewhere. And here it is, and just drag it onto the toolbar wherever you want it. So I can move it around wherever I want it to be. And so then click Done, and your icon is added to the toolbar. In Windows, it uses a different interface. It doesn't show you the icons, but it will give you a list of all the options that are available to you, and you can move them over into the list of selected options and add a toolbar icon that way. All right, so with that in the toolbar, I'm just going to go to New Paper. And a little like Keynote, I've got a number of different options that I can choose. So default, lecture, lesson, whatever. Let's just do lecture. And I'm going to drag this zone over here, just so that I've got a little more room and can see more of my stack and more of my paper at the same time. And so, you know, this is now an outline that is designed to be a class lecture. And I can drag any item from my stack directly into my lesson outline. So let's drag this over here, and I'll say, you know, I don't know, we can say story of Kinaz and Aksa. There we go. And then I've got the text, and that I just dragged in from my stack to be a second point. Then I can go down here and let's see. There it is. When you hover over an item, you'll get these little arrows. And if I click the right arrow, it should add a subpoint, or actually maybe that's, no, that will actually move the current point up or down a level. And then in the little gear menu, I can add a new sub-item, or I can add a new item under this. So I'll just add new item. So first I'm going to read the text, then I might write what is the Negev, and then I might say, okay, you know, here's the map of the Negev, and then here's this picture of the dry Negev. I'll just drag that in there. I want that over a little bit. Let's move it over one more, and so on. So I can kind of put together my outline, including illustrations, and create a paper that I'll then use to teach a lesson. So I know we've got webinars and podcasts on the use of the paper, so this is getting beyond the purview of this webinar. But I want you to see how you can use the stack to gather your research and then move that into a paper. And one of the advantages of the paper is that for each item you've got a number of different layers of information. You can show the title of each item. You can show the content, and that's what's displayed right now, just title and content. So story of Kinaz and Aksa, I could say, you know, I could write a full-blown manuscript. Now we come to a story of the conquest of the hill country of Judah. All right, and that would be, you know, ... That's going to be my long spelled out explanation of this story. That's the content. If I were to show the explanation, this is kind of like a summary of what you're going to be talking about. So here I've got my title, Story of Kinaz and Aksa. Then I can, my summary might be, you know, the story of a daughter given in marriage who isn't afraid to ask her father for stuff. All right, that's, I'll just make that as my summary of this whole thing. And then I can also show notes. And so underneath, let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see this a little better. In fact, I'm going to magnify this down so you can see this better. All right, so here's my summary, the story of a daughter given in marriage. Here's my text, my main content, which obviously would be a lot longer. And then notes is just a field for adding little notes to myself. So, you know, I might say include photo of wildflowers at De Beer. That was one of the photos that we looked at earlier in slideshow. All right, so I've now got 4 different layers of information that I can show or hide depending on my needs. So I'll often give this example. You know, if I'm preaching a sermon and I have to give the person that prepares the church bulletin an outline of my sermon, then I can just take my paper and hide everything but the titles, and I'll have a nice little outline that I can print out and send to the person that prepares the bulletin. If I'm wanting to publish a full manuscript of my sermon to the church website, I might display the title and the content and have my full manuscript there that can be displayed, right? But, you know, when I actually get up to preach the sermon, I don't want to preach from the manuscript because it's too hard not to start reading the manuscript. And I don't want to read it. I want to be engaged with my congregation or audience. So in that case, I might say, you know, I don't want the content. I just want the explanation or the summary. And so I would put in notes to myself here, you know, talk about this, or here are the, you know, the main points to cover or something like that. And just enough in my notes so that I can remember what I'm going to talk about next. And then I might display the notes to, you know, let's say that I have a separate individual is running the slideshow from the back of the church. So I might have my sermon manuscript and the summary here, and then say click to go to the next slide. Or I'll sometimes do this for myself. I'll just put click in the notes field so that I know, okay, when you get to this point, advance to the next slide. So you can essentially write once and then just deploy this paper for a number of different purposes. And there's lots you can do with the paper that I'm not even beginning to show you. But that's also something to consider when you are using Accordance to prepare a lesson and teach a lesson.